I opened my medicine cabinet one ordinary morning and felt something I hadn't expected: disgust. Not at the mess or the clutter, but at what I was actually looking at. Rows of orange prescription bottles, each with my name printed on a white label, each representing a different symptom, a different problem, a different dependency. Some were half empty, others expired, but all of them had one thing in common. They connected me directly to a system that profits from my weakness, my fear, and my ignorance. I stood there holding a bottle of antibiotics I'd been prescribed for a minor infection, reading the side effects listed in microscopic print, and I realized something terrifying. I had no idea what I was putting into my body, and worse, I had surrendered my health to strangers who saw me as a transaction, not a person. That morning changed everything. I started asking questions that made people uncomfortable. Where did medicine come from before patents existed? How did humans survive infections, fevers, chronic pain, and inflammation for thousands of years without pharmacies on every corner? What did my great-grandmother do when her children got sick in the middle of winter with no doctor within 50 miles? The answers I found were not hidden in ancient scrolls or forgotten libraries. They were hiding in plain sight, growing wild in fields, gardens, and even sidewalk cracks. What I discovered was a silent pharmacy, one that costs absolutely nothing, requires no prescription, and can literally fit in your pocket. 10 common seeds that have the power to replace almost everything you're buying today under the supervision of a medical system designed to keep you coming back. This isn't just about gardening or growing pretty flowers in your backyard. This is an act of resistance. This is about reclaiming sovereignty over your own body in a world that has convinced you that healing can only happen in sterile rooms under fluorescent lights. We're talking about seeds that the system deliberately ignores because they grow for free in any soil, because they can't be patented, because they empower you instead of binding you to monthly prescriptions and insurance copays. Imagine treating infections, chronic pain, inflammation, and fevers without needing anyone's permission, without a full bank account, without sitting in a waiting room for 3 hours only to be handed a piece of paper that costs you $200 to fill. But before we open this living catalog of healing, you need to understand that true health begins with your autonomy, your ability to make informed choices, and your willingness to break free from a dependency that has been carefully manufactured over decades. The real crisis we're facing isn't a shortage of medicine. It's the systematic erasure of knowledge about how to create it ourselves. These 10 seeds are survival codes that have been passed down through generations, whispered from grandmother to daughter, practiced quietly in kitchens and gardens while the modern world rushed toward chemical solutions and corporate medicine. They don't need laboratories, they don't need complex industrial processes, and they certainly don't need a middleman taking a cut of your suffering. They need only 3 things: soil, water, and the knowledge that has been deliberately scrubbed from our textbooks, our medical schools, and our collective memory. The secret that the pharmaceutical industry doesn't want you to know is devastatingly simple. The cure for humanity's most common diseases has been encoded in the DNA of plants that many people dismiss as weeds, as nuisances, as things to be poisoned and pulled from the earth. I want to tell you exactly how I arrived at this realization, because it didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't come from a place of privilege or conspiracy theory. It came from desperation. 3 years ago, I was spending over $600 a month on medications. I had pills for anxiety, pills for inflammation, pills for digestive issues, and pills to counteract the side effects of the other pills. I was trapped in a pharmaceutical loop, and every doctor I saw had the same solution: another prescription. I remember sitting in my car outside the pharmacy one afternoon, looking at the receipt, doing the math in my head, and realizing that I was spending more on medication than I was on food. That's when the anger set in. Not irrational rage, but clear, focused anger at a system that had convinced me I was broken and that only they had the keys to fix me. I started researching, not on social media or conspiracy websites, but in actual medical journals, historical texts, and ethnobotanical studies. I wanted to know what people used before the year 1900, before the Flexner Report reshaped American medicine, before natural remedies were systematically replaced with synthetic drugs that could be patented and sold at markup rates that would make any other industry blush with shame. What I found was astonishing. Cultures around the world, separated by oceans and centuries, independently discovered the same plants, the same seeds, the same preparations for treating identical conditions. This wasn't folklore or superstition. This was documented, repeatable, observable science that had been pushed to the margins because it threatened a business model built on chronic illness. Let me be very clear about what happened next, because this is where theory became practice. I didn't throw away all my medications and declare myself cured by magic beans. I'm not reckless, and I'm not asking you to be either. What I did was start small, with one condition, one symptom, one problem that I could address safely while observing the results. I chose to start with my recurring sinus infections, the kind that would send me to the doctor 3 or 4 times a year, for antibiotics that would work for a while and then stop working, forcing me onto stronger prescriptions with worse side effects. I was tired of it, tired of the cycle, tired of feeling like my body was a battleground for chemicals I couldn't pronounce. The first seed I planted was garlic, not the garlic you buy at the grocery store, which is often irradiated and incapable of sprouting, but organic garlic cloves from a local farmer's market. I planted them in October, following instructions I found in a 1930s agricultural manual, and I waited. When they were ready the following summer, I harvested them, and I started using fresh garlic in a way I never had before. Not just as food, but as medicine. I would crush raw cloves and let them sit for 10 minutes to activate the allicin, the compound responsible for garlic's antibiotic properties, then consume them with honey to make them palatable. Within 2 days of a sinus infection starting, the one I would normally have suffered through for 2 weeks, my symptoms were gone. Completely gone. No prescription, no side effects, no doctor's visit, no insurance claim. Just a plant I grew myself, harvested myself, and used myself. That success opened a door I couldn't close. If garlic could do that, what else was possible? I started studying the traditional uses of seeds that were considered common, even boring, by modern standards. Calendula, the bright orange flower that grows like a weed in temperate climates, turned out to be one of the most powerful skin healers known to herbalism. I learned that calendula can treat burns, cuts, fungal infections, and even speed the healing of surgical wounds. I grew calendula from seed, harvested the flowers at peak bloom, and made infused oils and salves that I used on everything from kitchen burns to my daughter's scraped knees. It worked better than any over-the-counter antibiotic ointment I'd ever bought, and it cost me the price of a seed packet, about $3, which produced hundreds of flowers over the course of a summer. Then came echinacea, the purple coneflower that indigenous peoples of North America used for centuries to treat infections and boost immune response. I grew echinacea from seed, which takes patience because it's slow to germinate, but once established, it's nearly impossible to kill. I learned to harvest the roots after 3 years of growth, when the medicinal compounds are most concentrated, and I made tinctures by chopping the roots and steeping them in alcohol for 6 weeks. That tincture became my first line of defense against colds and flu. At the first sign of symptoms, I would take a dropper full 3 times a day, and almost every time, the illness would either never fully develop, or would pass in half the time it normally would. No expensive immune boosters from the pharmacy, no shots, no pills, just a plant I grew, processed, and controlled from seed to medicine. Thyme was next, and this one surprised me because I'd always thought of thyme as just a culinary herb, something you put on chicken or in soup. But thyme contains thymol, a powerful antimicrobial compound that's actually used in many commercial mouthwashes and disinfectants. I started growing thyme from seed, which germinates quickly and thrives in poor soil, and I learned to make thyme tea for respiratory infections. When my son developed a persistent cough that wouldn't respond to over-the-counter suppressants, I brewed him strong thyme tea with honey, and within 3 days, the cough was gone. His pediatrician had been ready to prescribe antibiotics, which we avoided entirely. Thyme also became my go-to for sore throats, bronchitis, and even as a steam inhalation for sinus congestion. The cost a packet of seeds and some garden space. Yarrow, or milfoil, is a plant with a military history. Soldiers in ancient Greece and Rome carried yarrow to stop bleeding on the battlefield, and its botanical name, Achillea, refers to the warrior Achilles, who supposedly used it to treat his men's wounds. I grew yarrow from seed, and it's one of the easiest plants I've ever cultivated. It spreads aggressively, blooms prolifically, and requires almost no care. I learned to make yarrow poultices for cuts and nosebleeds, and I discovered that yarrow tea can bring down a fever faster than acetaminophen, without any of the liver toxicity. The first time I used it, my daughter had a fever of 103 degrees. I gave her yarrow tea, and within an hour, her fever broke and she was asking for food. I was stunned. This wasn't placebo. This was observable, measurable relief from a plant I grew in my backyard. Peppermint is so common that most people don't even think of it as medicinal, but it's one of the most versatile seeds you can plant. Peppermint grows like wildfire, and once you have it, you'll never be without it. I started using fresh peppermint tea for digestive issues, and it was like flipping a switch. Bloating, gas, indigestion, nausea, all of it would disappear within minutes of drinking a strong cup of peppermint tea. I also learned that peppermint oil, which I made by steeping fresh leaves in olive oil, could stop tension headaches almost instantly when rubbed on the temples. My wife, who suffered from migraines for years and spent hundreds of dollars on prescription medications, started using peppermint oil and saw a dramatic reduction in both frequency and intensity. We're talking about a plant that costs nothing to grow and provides relief that rivals pharmaceuticals. Chamomile is another plant that most people underestimate. It's not just a bedtime tea. It's a legitimate anti-anxiety and anti-inflammatory medicine. I grew chamomile from seed, which is tiny and requires careful planting, but once it's established, it self-seeds and comes back year after year. I started drinking chamomile tea every night, not for sleep, but because I wanted to see if it would reduce the chronic inflammation I'd been dealing with for years. Within 2 weeks, I noticed a significant decrease in joint pain and stiffness. My doctor had wanted to put me on a daily anti-inflammatory medication, which would have cost me $60 a month and came with a list of side effects including stomach ulcers and kidney damage. Chamomile gave me the same relief without any of the risks, and it cost me the price of seeds and some garden space. Dandelion is probably the most misunderstood plant on this list. People spend millions of dollars every year trying to kill dandelions in their lawns, when they should be harvesting them, as one of the most powerful liver and kidney detoxifiers in existence. I started growing dandelions intentionally, from seed in a dedicated garden bed where I could control the soil and ensure they weren't contaminated with pesticides. I learned to harvest the roots in the fall, roast them, and make dandelion root coffee, which supports liver function and helps the body eliminate toxins. I also learned to eat the young leaves in salads, which are more nutritious than almost any vegetable you can buy at the store. Dandelion greens are packed with vitamins A, C, and K, and they support kidney health by acting as a natural diuretic. My yearly detox, which I used to do with expensive supplements, now costs me nothing and works better than anything I ever bought. Sage is another plant with deep historical roots in medicine. Before toothpaste existed, people chewed sage leaves to clean their teeth and freshen their breath, and it worked because sage is a powerful antibacterial. I grew sage from seed, which takes patience, but once established, sage is a perennial that will produce for years. I started using sage tea for sore throats and mouth infections, and I was amazed at how quickly it worked. I also learned that sage has cognitive benefits, improving memory and focus, which has been documented in multiple clinical studies. I started drinking sage tea in the mornings instead of coffee, and I noticed a clarity of thought that I hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't wishful thinking. This was real, tangible improvement in cognitive function from a plant I grew myself. Finally, lemon balm, or melissa, is a plant that deserves far more attention than it gets. Lemon balm is a potent antiviral, particularly effective against the herpes family of viruses, including cold sores and shingles. I grew lemon balm from seed, and it's one of the easiest and most rewarding plants I've ever cultivated. It smells incredible, it grows rapidly, and it has profound medicinal properties. I made lemon balm tincture and used it at the first sign of a cold sore, and it stopped the outbreak before it fully developed. I also learned that lemon balm is a powerful nervine, meaning it calms the nervous system without sedating you. I started drinking lemon balm tea in the afternoons, and it helped me manage stress and anxiety better than any pharmaceutical I'd ever tried. These 10 seeds, garlic, calendula, echinacea, thyme, yarrow, peppermint, chamomile, dandelion, sage, and lemon balm, represent a complete medical system that costs almost nothing to establish and maintain. I'm not exaggerating when I say they replaced my medicine cabinet. Over the course of 3 years, I went from spending $600 a month on medications to spending almost nothing. I went from being dependent on a system that viewed me as a profit center to being self-sufficient, knowledgeable, and empowered. The most important thing I learned wasn't just about plants, it was about autonomy. When you can grow your own medicine, when you understand how your body works and what it needs to heal, you are no longer controlled by fear or scarcity. The system doesn't want you to know this because the moment you realize you don't need them, they lose power. They lose money. They lose the ability to dictate your choices and control your health. That's why this knowledge has been suppressed, marginalized, and mocked for decades. But the truth is resilient, and it's encoded in these seeds, waiting for anyone willing to learn. So now the choice is yours. You can continue depending on a pharmaceutical industry that profits from your chronic illness, or you can plant your own freedom. You can keep filling prescriptions and hoping for the best, or you can take control and grow your own pharmacy. These seeds are waiting. The knowledge is available. The only question is whether you're ready to act. If you found value in this story and you want to continue learning how to reclaim your health and autonomy, subscribe to this channel right now. There's so much more to explore, so many more seeds, plants, and techniques that can transform your life. Don't let this be the end of your journey. Let it be the beginning. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and join a community of people who are choosing sovereignty over dependency, knowledge over ignorance, and freedom over fear. Your health belongs to you, not to a system that profits from your suffering. Take it back. Start today.